Hi, everybody. So, up until now, we discussed about the small, um, few decisions of humans, and now we're going to talk about how to scale this through technology. So, how technology can help democracy face technology in a way. So, we have a great panel that's I think it's going to be a fantastic discussion between both practice and industry and academia and the more social sciences. So I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion in all kind of fronts. So I'm going to introduce everybody right now. So to lower the time period between each presentation. So we have Dr. Inbal Yahav from the Coller School of Management here at TAU, who will talk about the ethics of AI content moderation, finding a balance between safety and free speech. Then we have Mr. Noam Schwartz, CEO and co-founder of ActiveFence, who will talk to us about ActiveFence. Then we'll have Ms. Noga Ben Yoash from Microsoft Research and Development Center, who will talk about exploring the possibilities and limitation of generative models. And last but not least, we'll have Maayan Pearl and Niva Elkin-Koren. Maayan is from the Netanya Academic College School of Law, and Niva from here, obviously. If you haven't met Niva, here that's will be weird. So we'll talk about contestation by design, democratizing speech governance by AI. And then we'll have, I hope, an opportunity for a really rich discussion. So thank you, Inbal.
So, hi everyone. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but I only have 10 minutes. So, I want to start from the end. So, here's a nice example that summarizes all the problems that I think we have with content moderation. It's an example from a year and a half ago. A campaign for Hanukkah called Shine a Light was rejected from Facebook. And I think it's not the only case, obviously, but I think it's a good example that summarizes a lot of challenges that we have with content moderation online, and I want to raise some of them. Okay, here's one challenge that we have: is the basic question of what should be censored. Should we censor concepts like cyberbullying, hate speech, porn, etc.? Should we censor specific phrases like happened here? Should we censor all of this information, like all types of hate speech, or there's a grayscale that, and we don't want to censor everything? So it's a great question. I don't think we have an answer for that, but that's something we need to address. The second question is who gets to choose? Is it us as a community? Is it legal scholars? Is it culture dependent? Who decides? Is it an economic question? It's another type of question of what data should be, or who gets to choose what to censor. And the last question that I think bothers us all, maybe specifically in this panel, is how we should censor the data. Should we rely on human to censor information for us or to moderate content for us? Should we rely on machines that get smarter and smarter? I use this term, but I don't believe in it, and I'll show you in a second. Or should we use both? And this question, once we will be able to solve the question, or if we can solve the question of how to moderate content, I think it will help us understand what data we censor and how, or who gets to choose what data to censor. And I'll try to explain why I think that we need to solve this question first. Okay, so this question of how how the content should be moderated there are waves of beliefs in the CS community of how it should be done. There are those that believe that only human can censor data because they're the only ones that have reasoning, that can understand context, that can really differentiate between shine a light on a village and shine a light on an idea, okay? And the same phrase for completely different contexts. Those that believe that only human can do that, all those that believe that only AI can do that. And of course, there is a balance between them. They can do it together, but there are waves. You see in different years, in 2016, the hype of AI can do everything for us. Then there's an understanding that it's impossible, and I think there is a hype now again saying that AI can do everything for us, and it's very, very dangerous because AI cannot do everything for us. So taking the human perspective, that humans are the only one that can moderate data, those that believe that human is the solution believe that, again, as I said, human are the only one that understand reasoning. But obviously, there are problems with relying on human. Except for all the problem it causes for human population, humans or for human are subjective. And as being subjective, the question of who gets to choose, shrinks down to the person that sits and read the content itself. And we ran an experiment with Haaretz, and we realized that almost 50% of the data, 43% of the data is actually being censored, and it not necessarily in a good way. And once we put our annotators and we asked them all to redo the moderation, they could not agree among themselves. Okay, the perspective, the subjectivity of I believe it's a problematic, I do not believe it's a problematic, that's something that is very hard to solve, even though there is a rule book. For all of these websites, there is a rule book that explains how you should monitor data, how you should clean the internet, making it a better place. Still, they cannot agree. On the other hand, we have AI. AI is consistent. It's not subjective. It doesn't have feelings. The same content will be treated the same over and over and over. No problems here. However, once we take it into context or into reasoning, it has its own issues. It's going to be harder for AI to differentiate, shine a light from the village example to an idea example. Maybe in a very simple sentence, it's now easier to differentiate them, but taking it to a higher context, maybe external to the data context, it's still a hard problem, a challenging problem. So it's not surprising that the bottom line is that even though we have this awesome generative AI and awesome tools now, the bottom line is that machine cannot monitor data by itself, and it's always going to cause the problem that we saw at the beginning, that it's going to moderate content sometimes in a false way. And I think Noga is going to talk more about that, so I'm going to leave the discussion for Noga to explain why it happens. Or to answer or to repeat the concept that NLP or natural language processing is not a magic. We cannot believe that it's going to solve all of our human issues. So it's not. So what's the state now for content moderation, and how we're addressing the challenges of content moderation? So one common solution is saying, let's put human and machine together and let them decide together. This concept is called human in the loop. Okay, it's written here, or AI delegation. It's about the same. It means that some tasks only human can perform. We're gonna let AI start the job. Once it doesn't know, it has a gray area, it sends it to a human. Human gives its opinion. I think that's what happens in most of social media today. This concept is awesome. It works, but it assumes that human holds the knowledge. Going back to the subjectivity question, human does not hold the knowledge. Okay, especially not when we have this situation that are really problematic, that are really debateful. The other concept that I'm trying to advocate, and that's part of my research, is to let both of them, the human and machine, to learn the problem together, to discuss, okay? Not necessarily in a ChatGPT fashion, but conceptually to discuss what should be monitored. Human can say something, machine can solve the consistency problem and give reflect with a mirror on the decisions of the human. Then the human can change his opinion, and they can learn the problem together over time to better solve it. Almost done. To better solve the moderation problem in general and other problems that are related to the internet. And they can also address the question together of what we should censor, right? Because they can learn together the impact over time. Machine is very good at doing that and reflecting it back to the human, who can then decide what happens with the content. other solutions, which I also think that nicely address this gray area that we don't know what to do with, is to treat it differently. Instead of monitoring it, let's reduce the spread or the diffusion of content that we are not sure of. We can reduce the recommendation. We cannot recommend. Facebook recommends content for us. Let's not recommend information we're not sure of. Or, you're taking a picture, so I'm not going to go to the next slide. Or we can hide content. Okay, if we have a thread of comments, you think of a Ynet, for example, or a BBC, doesn't matter, like news sites, then it has a comment thread. We can hide comments in the middle so people, they're not highlighted. Okay, people look at the beginning of a comment thread, at the end of a comment thread. We can hide things in the middle. And now let's go back to the question that I asked. What do we censor? We can easily censor or monitor or moderate information that is extreme hate speech, extreme porn, and so on. And those that are in the middle, we want to keep the internet safe, but we also want to make sure that we don't make false mistakes, or we don't put any risk on human rights and what they're allowed to put online. Let's just reduce the visibility of this stuff. So that's another solution that I think a lot of solutions goes in this direction. And I'm going to stop here, although I have how long I have, but that's fine. I'm going to stop here and let the rest of the panel first present. Thank you.
Thank you, Inbal. Now we have Noam.
So hey everybody, thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure. It's super exciting to see like a room that is full of people that are so passionate about this topic. I had no idea like so many people are going to show up. And as someone that is doing trust and safety content moderation since 2008, this is like the largest crowd of people in Israel that I saw dealing with that. And really like incredible to see how this topic like got so much traction in Israel. So my name is Noam Schwartz. I'm CEO and co-founder of ActiveFence, a company based here in Israel that is in the trust and safety space and working with platforms of all sizes, helping them solve their trust and safety challenges. I'm here not to talk too much about ActiveFence. It's kind of like to give you a glimpse of what we do and hopefully give some more color from the industry about this topic and take questions if it's interesting to anyone. And I'll go over through that like slightly quicker than usual. The problem that we're dealing with are the problem that there's so much bad content online. Like I talked about the solution, but we're talking about insane amounts of child sexual abuse materials and terrorist content and disinformation, and nothing here is new to you guys. And I want to talk about what's going on as a reaction to that thing. And again, that concept, we started the company in 2018, started working about this since 2015, give or take. But the world started really taking notice, and big tech are now in the spotlight. Eventually, they're trying to understand what to do. And I think this is the most important kind of like visualization that kind of like got crooked now, that we created recently, because this is how I feel the market right now. And I'm sorry for dropping the academia, but that the social networks, the file hosting services, all of the big tech, all of the tech in general, which full of incredible people that are dedicated to solving trust and safety issues, facing so much problems, so much scrutiny, and so much fire from the media and from regulators, but they're not really giving clear directions. Now with DSA and other things, like we're starting to see some more guidelines. But this thing is, hey guys, you need to get your stuff together, and they're saying, tell us please what to do. What is the definition of child, something that is endangering to children? I'm not even touching what is disinformation. We all saw what happened in the Twitter files when you're making mistakes, and all of a sudden you're getting so much heat and it backfires. And this thing is eventually what we're also trying to help our customers to do. We believe that everybody's trying to solve this problem, but it's not necessarily in the right direction. And you all know that the legislation is changing, and there's a lot of things that are like local and for specific states, for specific countries, and it's also something super important for the investment community. And those folks that I'm so happy that you brought them up are suffering because the folks that are actually doing the moderation for the BPOs are making none and are getting hurt so much. And this thing that is causing so much problem is why we founded the company, because we felt that the solutions that exist for that problem right now are way too complex. It takes too much time to integrate them. You need to have a model per topic, per language, per medium. You need to start think about how can you, like human in the loop, not human in the loop. Well, this model is drifting. There's not enough. There's not enough training data, and the moderation platform isn't good enough. And I don't know what to do in the middle when an escalation happening, and I need to hit my SLA. And this it's such a mess that every time that I think about someone giving a trust and safety expert an advice of how to do their job, it requires so much context, so much gray areas that it's almost impossible. And it got to a situation that every company, every policy, every trust and safety tech stack is slightly different, which is also a problem because if you're trying to solve something in a scalable way, you need to find the commonalities. You can't find only the things that are different. And the main challenges that we're thinking about is the poor accuracy. Definitely agree with what you said about 90%. 90% is not enough. NLP is not like a magic bullet here. There's tons of knowledge gaps when you're trying to create new models. Like there's a new type of disinformation in one state in India. Good luck figuring out how to deploy something to detect that very, very fast. And the operational complexity that a lot of people are underestimating. Sometimes you need to have thousands of moderators in a follow the sun model and actually make sure that they are following the same policy, the QA is the same, the quality is the same. And those are humans. Like people are tired. Sometimes they're just like click, 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 click. They don't care, and nobody noticing. And we're experiencing that as a real problem with the algorithm and censorship. But sometimes it's just like a lazy person or just like a sad person that didn't want to do their job, and those things are eventually accumulating to a massive problem that every company with user-generated content on their platform, which actually are not social networks. Think about companies like Deliveroo. Okay, it's like a food service company. They're our customers. They run their the texting between the carrier and the people that are ordering food. Think about companies like Panera Bread. Like they have a trust and safety team for the content they are publishing online. So it's not just them. And when we started the company, and the company, as I said, like started in 2018, about 300 people worldwide. Most of them are in Israel. We raised about $100 million from investors here in Israel, like Grow Ventures and also CRV and Norwest in Silicon Valley. We're working with some of the most amazing customers in the world. Like I can't name most of them, but some of them I'm naming here, like Vimeo and SoundCloud and Deliveroo and Linktree. And a few other really great folks. And eventually what we're helping them is with a large variety of topics, from child abuse, disinformation, terrorist content, violent extremism in general, all the way to spam, bullying, and even profanity and nudity, the entire spectrum of the trust and safety challenges. And the way that we're doing it, it's super straightforward. We basically let our customers scan all a part of their content for us. We're screening it. They can choose what models to use. They can choose our models. They can choose their own models. They can choose a third-party model. They can just do keywords. They can do whatever new technology that is available. they can integrate with us, and we will screen it, and we will make sure that they can implement their policy. The hard part is defining what do you even want to stop, or what do you want to pass, and what's the threshold. And those things are changing on a daily basis sometimes. Sometimes you have like a strain of hate speech that all of a sudden became the norm. Like you're being asked by your policy team, what is hate? It's hate against minorities. Which minorities? If it's hate against the entire world, I hate everything. Is this against the terms of service? There's a lot of subtleties that comes into mind, and we are helping our customers to actually do that and funnel that to the right people that are actually making the decisions based on the policy. And again, most of the content is being stopped automatically by the companies. To talk a bit about how we do what we do, and this is more relevant to the, let's say, the more harsh content, hate speech, child sexual abuse material, terrorist content. We have a technology that we call the database of evil, or the knowledge graph, which are eventually us believing that if you train algorithms on a really, really good set of data, it will outperform state-of-the-art algorithms that are trained on, let's say, regular data. So if we can get the most recent examples of ISIS content, Al-Qaeda content, Proud Boys, whatever hate groups or all kinds of terrible manuals for pedophiles, like really bad stuff, and train our models based on them and extract all of the signals, all of the features, the way that it's being called, we will be able to outperform everything that is out there. And it actually works. And that's exactly what we do. And this is how we're developing our classifiers. And we have also a set of applications that eventually the trust and safety teams are working on. They can design their policy. They can translate their written policy to an interface. They can deploy it and actually work with the R&D team, the product team, to build this, to get all of the models in place. And they have the ability to actually moderate that and also find the mistakes, also find the bias, not necessarily the mistakes. Because sometimes you have folks that are just saying no for one topic that doesn't really make sense. We need it also to be equitable. So all of that, like in one management platform, is a very different vision for trust and safety teams in general, because usually the industry is based on point solutions and not on an operating system, and holistic approach for trust and safety. And that's what we are doing right now in ActiveFence. 11 minutes.
So now we'll have Noga Ben Yoash. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm here to talk to you about what are generative models, what can they do and what can they not do. And I want to start with a question to the audience. How many of you have heard about GPT, ChatGPT, and get to experiment with it and play with it? Okay, good. Good start. To me, it feels as if GPT is all around us, and I found just two interesting examples in our content. A judge just used ChatGPT to make a court decision. GPT passes the bar exam. This is unbelievable. Something is going on here, and I think it's very relevant for us as a tool, and I want to discuss this as a machine that could impact content moderation. And I want to start by explaining what are generative models, and we'll focus on the text generative models. There are all kinds of models for computer vision, for pictures, and for audio, but we will focus on text. And we are all used to work with AI systems, with artificial intelligence machines, but we're used to work with them in a specific context. Just to name two examples, we have classification. Now we can provide email and the machine would understand if it's like spam or not spam. We can give it movie reviews, an incredible movie, one that lives with you, and the machine could identify if it's a good or bad review. Another example would be clustering, when we can provide the machine like a big corpus of text, maybe newspapers or articles, and the machine would cluster them by topic, Like the green topic would be sports, and the red would be economics, and maybe entertainment would be a yellow cluster. But now, in the past year or so, but actually it's 5 years, we experiment with something different, like general purpose machine, and it is called LLM, large language models, and they are generative. They generate text. And this is just, I played with ChatGPT and I asked it, tell me why ChatGPT is awesome. And it actually produced a very awesome response to this question. Like a long, big paragraph explaining this thing. And it seems as if this GPT or LLM, they can do anything. They can summarize text, they do translation, they answer questions, they can answer your homework, they write code. It seems as if they can do anything. And when we talk about online speech, it has everything to do with online speech. On the one hand, it can generate content, it can generate text, it can rephrase ideas for you, write blogs. On the other hand, it could moderate your content, it could identify intention within text, it could compare text. It can do anything. It feels as if. But I think that what we should do now is to understand how it works behind the scene, like under the hood. And the first thing to say is that all LLMs are deep neural networks. It's a technology we're familiar with. And they are large language models. They're actually large in 3 dimensions. The first one would be that they are trained on such a big amount of data. It feels as if they know the entire internet, like they know everything we've ever written. They are also actually big. The model size, the neural network, is very big. It has billions of parameters, kind of like a big brain in a way, in a scale we have never seen before. This is something very new to the scientific community. And we also use high computing power to train those machines. And this is like the source of power. They are actually very, very big, and they can do many things due to that. And all LLMs are trained to do a specific task. And the task we trained them to do is to auto-complete text, auto-complete sentences. And let's have a look at an example. So let's assume I want to ask LLM, GPT, what is Lag BaOmer? So behind the scene, LLM would take this sentence and treat it as the beginning of a story. A story. LLM is a storyteller. And when we want it to answer a question, what it actually do is to find the next most suitable word to complete the sentence with. So it asks itself, okay, what would be the next word in this story? So it says, okay, I've seen billions of sentences before, and I know there is a structure of what is something, question mark, something is, etc. So it assigns a very high probability to the word lag to be the next word. And then it thinks, okay, the word this is also applicable here. What is something, question mark? This is, etc. But it has lower probability. And the word potato has something to do with this domain, so it assigns it some probability. And the word building has nothing to do with this sentence, so it wouldn't be it. And this is how it chooses the next word to be lag. And then it starts all over again. It tells a story. What is Lag BaOmer lag, and what would be the next word here? It looks at the dictionary, and it says, okay, it could be is, Lag BaOmer, lag is, but it's more probable it would be BaOmer. It is more suitable in this context. Potato still has something to do with this, but the grammatical structure is less appropriate, and building still has nothing to do with it. And this is how it chooses BaOmer to be the next word, etc., etc. And this is how it answers the question, like build the story. Once again, it is a story. And it is amazing to understand that all tasks are being performed in this manner. This is how we answer questions, summarize texts, answer questions, once again. And everything is built using this mechanism. This is not human logical reasoning. This is something else. This is a different behavior. The LLMs, GPT, they do not take facts and combine them and integrate them and generate an answer to a question. No, this is a whole different behavior. And just I played, I think it was from a few days ago, I asked GPT this very, very simple task. How many A letters appear in the sentence, I ate chocolate? And it couldn't do this. This is such a simple task because it is not designed to do that. It is not designed to do that. It is not magic, as stated before. And actually, in my day job, what I do is to combine LLMs within products in Microsoft. And we see that we, as customers, as people, we expect the system to be reliable and to produce correct answers and to use appropriate language and to be transparent in the way we generate answers. And you can see that LLM does not easily fit to our expectations. We have many challenges to make it work the way we are used to. And just to name a few, and the first one would be that GPT tells a story. It sometimes hallucinates. This is the scientific term of what it could do. And sometimes GPT just make up a story that has nothing to do with your request. So we need to somehow control that. It could be experienced as misinformation. So human in the loop was discussed here. And when we want GPT to do something that is has to do with exact facts, sometimes we combine it with other algorithms at this point. We want it to be transparent, but as you can understand, we sometimes cannot trace back why did it choose the answer it produced. And there is a whole new field called retrieval knowledge augmentation trying to answer this question. And it's a fascinating time to work on those things. And I'll wrap up and say that those LLMs are an answer and a challenge together because they're extremely powerful. What they can do is unbelievable, unheard of. And they change their lives already. And there are countless developments and the hype around us, wow. But on the other hand, it's a new type of technology, kind of feels like an alien in a way. And we sometimes forget to ask regarding my own specific need, my own specific task, how good is it to perform my task, to measure, is it suitable? Because it can do so many things, but our needs are usually more specific. And I feel as if we're in the process of like mutual adaptation. Like on the one hand, we as people and society, we adjust our expectations now that we know what it can and cannot do. And on the other hand, we generate guardrails to make sure it does what is expected to do. Thank you.
So unsurprisingly, we're talking about this technology and everybody's really efficient in their talk. So Mayan and Eva, thank you.
So, and I like to take us back to some of the issues that we have discussed from the perspective of law, and that is actually how to bridge the legal demands that we had, that we don't want disinformation, and we don't want hate speech, and we don't want lots of stuff on these content moderation systems. But we need to address it at scale, and therefore we rely on these systems. And in this gap, there are errors that we actually discussed to some extent in the previous panels. But what I'd like to focus on is what are we missing as we shift to these systems, and that is at the social level. What is hidden behind these scores that you're giving to each and every word? And so let's just think about two types of, controversy that we had during COVID, right? For instance, whether social media platform has, filtered out too much information or too little information. Maybe they deprive the public from some information. Or think about another type of controversial issues, whether the US government, the US legislators should introduce this new law, SMART, that would require platforms to actually install some copyright filters. Right holders are thinking that, that social media platforms are doing too little. And of course, some other advocates think that they're doing too much, that they filter out already some fair use materials and some free speech materials. So this is these are controversies that we have in society, and normally we would negotiate these issues through legal institutions. So in law, we have different institutions that would enable us as a society to negotiate the trade-offs in each of these solutions. We have a legislator where we hopefully have some deliberation. We could have some different meaning of these trade-offs that are being implemented by regulators. Courts could decide different cases about, filtering, about social media, what is disinformation or not. We have different instances of courts. Each of them could decide these issues differently. We have due process that makes sure that people can contest a particular meaning of disinformation or free speech or a particular trade-off that was selected by a legislator. And we have public deliberation. So all of these institutions are actually discursive institutions that make sure that we have the ability to object speech norms, to identify as a society points of controversy and say, this is something that we need to make a choice about. And to especially facilitate some common ground for us to keep us as a society and not be polarized into these very separated regimes. And so when we look at speech governance by AI, we're actually losing a lot of it. So we've heard about these systems. This was not planned. I haven't seen your presentations before, but the way that Noga was describing this system lack any explicit norms, right? It's all about probability, about data. Noam explained to us that he requires examples from which he can learn about the type of content that would then be filtered out. It is all based on predictions. It's recursive, it's dynamic, and learn from the thing that it already saw. And it is optimizing. This is something that we have discussed in the previous panel. It is optimizing some interests, normally the business interests of platforms. And so all these speech norms actually are hidden in machines that are moderating content. And so these are black box for us. We've heard about deep neural networks. This is being communicated to publics, what Tomer called in the previous session discourses, right? Or some other people call publics, because each of us see different type of content. So we don't know what we all see as a society, because we each are focusing, we're seeing different things in our feed. And of course, statistics and probabilistic, scorings do not provide us with intelligible, with comprehensive information about which we can decide as a society whether we like it or not. If we have disputes either in courts or, as Amy was describing to us, in the oversight boards, they look at particular cases. And so we have some disputes of users that are complaining that they're being terminated or the content has been removed. Or we have disputes where people were harmed by some content online. But we don't have any systemic perspective, and that is what we are actually missing in this type of environment.
Thank you, Niva. So, no, we're continuing. It's this one, right?
This is the 2-in-1.
Okay, before that. So the importance of having a systematic perspective, which is currently sort of lacking in content moderation by AI, is something that is, of course, not only relevant to content moderation, but it is coming to all systems of AI that follow hidden trade-offs that you cannot reveal through ad hoc or case-to-case disputes. You need something comprehensive in order to understand these trade-offs. So the shift to a systemic approach is something that is evident in recent initiatives by different policymakers and legislators. We're calling to gain AI accountability through comprehensive mechanisms of transparency, explainability, impact assessment, and audit. And all of these are about revealing something broader about the inner trade-offs and not about just judging a single case and checking if it got it correct or not. So our proposal is for contestation by design, and we suggest an adversarial approach inspired by law. And what we offer is to try to translate the legal institutions and processes that we have in law into technological features that can be embedded in the AI system of content moderation. So, for instance, if we have adversarial processes in the law, which are meant to facilitate meaningful deliberation between competing views in order to identify trade-offs and extract an explicit speech norms. So let's see how could these AI systems of content moderation whether they can do the same thing. Moreover, our proposal is about facilitating an independent check that would test the trade-offs of the AI system against an agreed norm and against an agreed speech norm. So basically what we want is to take what the platform has as a content moderation system and to run it on a third party, an independent third-party content moderation system, and to see whether it matches or whether it doesn't match with the independent system. Another benefit is to harness AI to check AI. And by using AI, we kind of bypass the limitation of individual disputes. So we can gain something that is broader. We can gain the ability to check if a specific outcome is later translated into an actual change in the technological definitions of the system. And finally, it's again a systemic approach that would provide input for regulators and public deliberation. When we see the trade-off, then we can decide whether we agree or disagree. If we can understand, if we can know that the system, for instance, blocks parody or blocks criticism, we can then discuss whether we like it or we don't like it, whether it's good or bad, but we have something to begin a discussion and a disagreement. So how do we implement democratic contestation by design? So one option is that we suggest is to use adversarial process for designing trade-offs. And basically the idea is to take this adversarial principle of the law and to translate it into the AI system. So we think about using a sort of a public AI filter that reflects social norms. Let's say in copyright it will reflect fair use principles, and whenever the platform's AI system would trigger a piece of content, then it will have to run over the public AI to see whether removal indeed reflects the social norm, the societal norms. Of course, if we have, in case that there is a clash between what the platform's AI system decides and what the public AI system decides, we need a subsequent procedure of resolution. It can be with a third system or human review, but at least we have this dialogue and contestation between the platform and between the social norms. So what can we gain? We gain a procedural framework of evaluation which is it's based on turning prediction and statistics of the platforms into something that we that reflects trade-offs, something that we can analyze and understand what it means in terms of speech norms. So it's not about deciding whether banning criticism or parody is good or bad. It's about understanding that when the predictive rule of the platform restricts certain content, then it means that it restricts fair use, to understand the meaning of the predictive rule. Moreover, it's a systematic verification that gives us assurances that the probabilistic threshold was tested against an agreed norm. Moreover, it enables to identify points of controversy, because, thank you, especially when we're dealing with systems that are non-transparent and opaque, we have a way to identify disagreements and to understand what these systems promote and what they do not promote. And finally, we gain a shared ground, which is a technological infrastructure to voice collective dissent, not just single objection to norms, but something that is collective and is embedded in the in the public AI system. So to conclude, contestation by design is a complementary tool for governing AI speech moderation. It's not, it doesn't, we don't mean to replace individual disputes and checks by, if it was a Facebook board or by courts, but to add another aspect to that in order first to check whether what is decided on a case-by-case basis is actually implemented and translate into the machine, and again to have the ability to identify mismatches between the predictive rule that is just a prediction. It doesn't reflect any normative trade-offs with our societal normative that we would like to promote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm guessing that there's a lot of questions in the crowd, but I'll start with a small observation that most of us talked about it, about the subject right now, and even in previous panels, we talked about content moderations. And then Noam talked about trust and safety, which make me think about what are the different values that are embedded in that kind of framing, and about the role of technology in providing it. So, for instance, the Emmy in the previous panel talked about how the oversight board dealt with 50 cases in the end up until now, out of 5 million. 2.5 million. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the movement of the scale, right, from 2.5 million to 50, and there's something in between. And so I want to know more about how you move from that number to that number, and the kind of maybe the tool that you provide, because it seems that it's the just the movement from that scale to that scale is something that's hard to take into the mind and to understand how that operates.
Cool. So just like to start with your question about why is the term trust and safety and what are the different values. So content moderation is part of trust and safety, but it's not everything. Like, for example, in trust and safety, you'll have also fraud detection and identity verification and situational awareness of things that are happening on other platforms. So for example, think about content moderation for a dating app. Okay, someone is being very abusive towards another. You want to try and figure out that that person that is logging into your app is not a predator or is real. Same goes for marketplace when you try to verify the identity of a merchant. So it's only a part of that. It's like when we're talking about the content and we're scanning it, and then we need to make the decision. This is where content moderation comes into place. But it's also there's it's freestyle. People are using those like sometimes it's that, sometimes it's this. Like it depends on what the media prefers. So again, TLDR, content moderation is part of trust and safety. Trust and safety is the term the industry is using. People who are content moderators are usually reports to the operation department within the trust and safety organization. That's how it usually works. Specifically for that number, now, this is the Supreme Court, the independent Supreme Court, but those numbers are actually very, very small. Like 2.5 million is nothing. We're now going to provide like free quota of 1 million like a month for texts or something like that. It's really nothing. So when you're thinking about conversion, eventually and I hope I'm answering the question. There's for even small platforms, there are millions and millions of pieces of content that are being funneled through the content detection layer. A piece of that depends on the threshold of the policy is being then funneled to the moderation team. And sometimes they're even not like looking at everything. Sometimes their shift manager is saying, well, this is all crap. This is like a bug. Or that's using the new keyword that was not flagged. We'll take it out. So again, those numbers are not like that high. The conversion is actually way smaller.
So thanks everyone for a very interesting panel. I have, I think, one interesting question for Noga about using AI in commercial products. And I think if we talk about Bing, the search engine by Microsoft, so now it promises to use the power of AI, specifically GPT. But you specifically mentioned that those models are storytellers. They are working on autocomplete. And it seems like the promise of this AI is to analyze and integrate data from another sources. So I would like to hear more. Is it different, or how even is it responsible to present an AI search tool, which is much more dramatic, I think, than image generating or trust and safety? And I wanted to ask maybe Niva and Maayan, I think it's also related to question from Microsoft. Is there any chance of public AI? We know it requires mass amounts of resources. There are only 4 groups in the world who can actually build large language models. So who will build the public AI that can oversee all the commercial AI products?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for your question. I'll say that I'm not from the Bing organization within Microsoft, so so I'll say this: those LLMs are evolving. They're like the new GPT, the GPT-4 is much more capable than what we've seen before, and we'll see what's about to come. And those models are actually wonderful. They perform better than everything we have seen before, and you use AI in many aspects of your life, and as well as in the search engines existing today. And the results we get in the Bing are phenomenal right now. It is important to say that we need to be alerted. I think this is like the message I wanted to say here. You need to be alerted and make sure you understand the process they perform. And today, the research regarding how you combine sources, generate correct answers, it is so exciting to see what's there. And the results today are very good. There are new guardrails making sure that once you use Bing or any other engine for this matter, the results are good and they're safe today, but they still on the process of improvement. This is not perfect yet. I think that this is the experience we have. And I think that the more we use them, the more the research understands what are the problems that we need to solve. Like this is my own opinion. It is good to take those products out and to fix what need to be fixed, and not to generally make a very, very perfect system. And it would take us 5 years to do that. And I think this is the process. I'll say that in products I'm working on, this is we have like very strict boundaries of how good those products should be and what correctness it should provide. So.
Okay. Can I also reply this exact question, if you don't mind? If you think about how Noga explained the model, is basically it's a probability distribution over terms, right? So, and that's the core of integration. Because if you take a single document, you don't have a probability distribution over terms because the terms appear there are very few times a term appear. Once you take a larger corpus, a larger set of documents, and you want to find the probability distribution of that, then it has a distribution based on the number of times it appears in all these documents. And that's basically how you integrate them, right? You take the core by taking the terms that appears most in these documents. So I think that the use of Bing, for the way they use these LLMs, that's what meant to be. Okay, that's exactly as developing code with ChatGPT or with these LLMs, because it takes the core of the information. It integrates the information of the community of everything. I think that the other question is harder. How you find the innovation, how you find the things that do not repeat as much, that are also interesting, how you find ideas that no one thought about before. That's actually harder for these models.
So for the question for Niva and I think that it's important. I think that the procedure is important here, and that we're not talking about a single public AI. It could be different ones, not only one, and it could be by civil society. It could be by private companies. But the idea is that the end where we're looking at is to have, in the end, we don't want to have a single trade-off, which is the invisible trade-off of the platform. So, and if we're talking about our perspective is democratic contestation, is so we want to have a dialogue and deliberation, and we want to contest it with something else. It's less important for now, the normative, with what we contested, but at least we have something to contest it with. It could be several things and different things. It doesn't have to be one thing that in one single, a different one, a single alternative trade-off. It could be different ones.
I think my question is, it's to all of you. It's also for Noam. You keep talking about speech. You speak in English, although we're here, and we're thinking about the possibilities that ChatGPT could do in order to add up. And I'm going back to my vision that soon enough, only in English, we will be capable to receive that kind of service, safety, and freedom of expression. Do you have a vision? One question is to what happens to all, we like to say, to the global south, which, by the way, is one of the biggest emerging markets. Hundreds of languages and people who need to be understood, and historical and linguistic context and humor and cynicism that needs to be evaluated. And do you have, and this is why I'm asking also Noam, because he's working with the trust and safety teams, is there some kind of vision that says that users will be able to mark themselves as saying, I'm just kidding, or I'm whatever doing, in order to be protected from the misinterpretation in their language?
Okay, so I think Amy kind of stole my question. My question is about context. Okay, it's for Noam and maybe for Inbal also, because you talk about keywords and blacklists and moderators, could be AI moderators, human moderators, but and we know a lot of moderation, especially in-house moderation, is offshore. And how do we deal with context? Because something that may be toxic now or here could be legitimate in another place or in another time, or even by another person. We know that some things are legitimate when somebody says them, but maybe somebody else saying them, it could be offensive. So
those are like all incredible questions, and we can have an entire discussion just on them. So just on the context, there's in the industry there's several ways to define context. One of them would be what was said before and what was said after. One of them is more what you're talking about, the cultural context of things. Like when you say like a term that might be acceptable in community A, it would be completely unacceptable in community B. And this concept is kind of like what almost triggered our technology. Like I think the contextual, like what was said before, what was said after, the tone is also super important. But that's almost like a commodity. A lot of folks are doing that. It's like every large platform is doing that. But I was talking about knowledge gaps, about the trust and safety team. They don't really understand what those folks are talking about. Like, is it bad? Is it good? It sounds like it's nonsense. They can't. They're not equipped to do that. And this is like what Emmy is asking eventually. Everybody knows the election in the U.S., but there's like election in Gujarat. Okay, who's going to give them the context? Who knows the general attorney in Himachal Pradesh? It's I don't know if it works this way, and the way that there's also some sort of bias and almost discrimination against topics that can be insane, like very popular, like in a bad way, like child abuse in Indonesia, but it would be under researched, and a lot of folks are researching in languages that they understand, but not a lot of people are doing that, and it's a real problem. The way that we're addressing it is actually by losing money on that. We have over 100 researchers that are creating knowledge bases on many different topics, on many different countries, and I'm getting hit by that by my investors all the time. We're spending too much money on those things, but I believe that the only way to actually solve that is to have expertise in almost every massive bad area, like around the world, in meaningful languages. But it's almost impossible to do it alone. It really takes a village. It takes a world. And there's like all kinds of initiatives that I'm sure some of you know, like the GIFT CT for counterterrorism and other issues, and NECMEC for child abuse images. But one of the reasons that we believe in an open platforms, almost like open source ideology, is because we cannot solve it on our own. The platforms will not solve it on their own. There's just not enough people. There's not enough money to sponsor those researchers. And I believe that academia and regulators and the industry and individuals can do that. And yes, I believe that individuals can support that. There's like all kinds of initiatives, like in Israel and around the world, that we're trying to support is in some sort of crowdsourcing training of models. Because while the platform might not prioritize a specific topic, and I won't prioritize a specific topic, that person, it's really painful for them. And they would like to label this piece of content, and someone will eventually transform it into training data. Hope I answered the questions.
I don't have a lot to add. I refer to context. I like differentiate between two types of context. Context is within the text, and context that is external to the text. Whatever is within the text, whether it's before, after, somewhere else, is solvable. Whatever is external is not solvable. And that's why I believe we will always need human as part of the loop. External would be, for example, if I sit on the floor and I'll tell you, I'll feel like the Turkish ambassador. So you have the context of why I feel like that, but it's not in my text, right? We haven't talked about it before. So a model would not be able to understand what happened unless the case is part of the text. That's external to the text.
This is fascinating. Thank you. I want to maybe approach it from a slightly different perspective, and that is the concern about the normative power of the actual. So part of the statistics that you're reflecting to us assumes either under Niva and Mayan's model, that there is a community consensus, understanding, or some other body that is not just a fact, but it is normatively desirable in some way. And the same goes for the chat GPT. If I ask the chat GPT as a judge, what would be the right decision here? And then a story will be told. And the question is, how do we make sure that this normative dimension is somehow it's a design question, is flagged highly, saying, no, please beware, this is not normatively correct in any way. Now, I agree that the value of contestation in and of itself, a second order value, is a good idea. The question then before is, what do you contest against what? Because you could be contesting against something that you're going to say, no, don't contest against that. That's not a good idea to contest against. So, you know, I guess it's an endemic question of what you do with the idea of trust, you know, truly, because you know, euphemisms used by corporations are always interesting. You call it trust, you call it ethics, you call it all kinds of nice things. The question is, how do we make sure it is indeed that case?
So my question is, I've recently seen that there's a leaked Google Docs that's been saying that language learning models have actually escaped the big corporations, and that many tinkerers are being capable of, they're creating their own language models. It's gone far and above beyond ChatGPT, and that it's actually going to, in all likelihood, add tremendously to the capabilities of the language learning models. And so that's question number one. I just want to hear what your insights are on that. And question number two is with regards to the moderation question. I haven't heard any discussion about Twitter's community notes. And what I've personally seen with regards to these community notes is it seems to kind of address all of the concerns that show up here, because what Twitter has done is, number one, they've incorporated people from the outside to kind of create their regulation. And what they're essentially doing is not moderation, it's not censoring. But what they do is they get a consensus from outside actors to add context to a tweet. Now, you may disagree with you may disagree that the context deserves to be said, but it actually is. It's linked. It has a basis. And what's so stunning about this is that you see this even with regards to the advertising. That you'll have that Twitter will attach community notes to advertising, which will kind of undermine the advertiser's message, which to me was so astounding because, for example, YouTube, which with all its talk about avoiding misinformation and taking down all of this misinformation on their platform, they're still letting advertisements that are clearly fake run rampant on their platform. And so I'm curious about what you have to say about that.
I want to start by answering your first question about the models, their size, their capabilities. I think that we can learn from what happened in computer vision like 8-10 years ago, I don't know, or so. And the process was that big systems were developed, and then because it was very expensive to use them and to inference with them, so slightly smaller models with similar capabilities were developed, and this is the process we see now in language, and it's actually very similar in many ways. You can compare those two revolutions, and today it is true that many new models, open source models, are being developed, and they are very capable. But in my opinion, we'll see that the big companies with the big resources and big computing, they would generate all the time new and more impressive things that the small models will not be able to do, and it's like a racing process. I think that's about it. And those small models are actually very good, but as I said before, it depends on how you measure them. And I think that we see that the big companies at the beginning, they treated those LLMs as research They published papers, you could read what they did under the hood, but as we go along, it became a very business thing, and you do not know what they do, how they do, what data did they use, things like that. It's becoming, well, a business. And those small models are open and you can understand what's there, but they're not trained on the same amount of data and in the same manner, of course. And all kinds of new architectures are not there. So we'll see where it goes.
That's a great question, but also that kind of like encapsulate everything. Safety is a subjective term. Trust is how a user feels when he's using the platform. Can he trust you? It includes many things. We're just talking about this internally. I think explainability is a wonderful word that you understand what happened, and obviously the accountability of the platform. But it's also about like how reliable is the product. Like you just bought something, you expect to get it. So it's kind of like a recursive discussion. Like a trusted platform is a good platform, and a good platform is a profitable platform, and so on and so forth. So the economical interest is to have a trusted platform. No, in trust and safety is a very let's say an ungrateful experience, because there will be always someone that thinks that you're an idiot, or even like malicious. And that's like to kind of like go to your question. We never encountered a situation like that, and it's a good question because we sell products, and when if someone will decide, we had a similar situation. We had someone that said, "I just want this discussion to be about tech, about code. I do not want politics here," and we allow that. It's like, okay, use whatever keywords you want and stop. Like if someone is saying PHP, like don't let them do that. And I asked the question, I'll return this to you, like in a symmetrical way. It's like, am I the guardian of morality? It's like if someone is saying, well, that's my moral, that's your moral, and it's a very slippery slope. And again, going to another recursive discussion, but what would we allow, what will not? It's like even the definition of this is disinformation, this is not disinformation. Like I brought up the Twitter files before because there was something that was in the consensus, and then it's not. And people and a lot of people felt very bad about things that happened, and the whole discussion about government intervention. And this is like a very risky discussion to have. So there's no specific keywords that you can't use with us, but we definitely we share the same value as the platforms, that they want to elevate safety and trust and accountability and transparency and everything to be equal. And it's also about how do you call it, how AI is actually treating the content. This is also why explainability and go against bias is a massive part of what we do. Because this is like really dangerous when you're counting just on AI to do that. Hope I answered the question. And the community guide, yeah, it's like I think it's part of the solution, but it's very fast becomes like Wikipedia now. Like Wikipedia gets a lot of heat. The EU decided it's a VLOP, so they're like now on the need to figure this out. I think it's part of the solution, but it's not really solving anything by its own. So like I think that the most important solution is media literacy. Like teach your kids to read the news and ask questions. This is what will solve most of the problem. But don't think that the comments will solve the really meaningful problem that we're going to face. That it will be almost impossible to differentiate between truth and false.
So you were talking about filtering the output of generative models. So it's a very tricky question, and there are many bottlenecks we experience. I want to address just a few. I think that those LLMs are very good at eventually performing what we tell them to do, and the more instructions we provide, They are more focused to do what we want them to do. And I think in this context, it's very hard for us as humans to define exactly what we want. And the more examples we provide to those LLMs in a specific question, the more examples, the more accurate styling instructions, the better they perform. And I experienced that once we can identify what we want, it gets better. And once we provide many feedback loops on top of this generative models, they learn. They are great learners. And this is one of the processes we're doing right now. It also has to do with like offensive responses. If those LLMs produce something that is wrong, you need to somehow teach them to stop that. And this reinforcement learning could be very important in this context.
Can I add something to this? I want to give an academic answer instead of the industry answer. I think that generative AIs are the echo chambers of the previous generation. I don't think there is an answer to what you're asking. I don't think there's a good answer to what you're asking or to what you're asking. We're using models that replicate what we as a community say. If we as a community are wrong, then reinforcing the model with the wrong information will just echo the wrong information. And maybe that's our place as academia, to do something else that doesn't have an economic perspective to the result that is really for doing good. We're not there yet.
Okay, my question is geared towards Noga and Mayan specifically. I'm curious to understand, let's say in products and the scope of Microsoft and the scale of Microsoft, is there now a focus on like content moderation by design, the same way there was a focus on, or there is a focus on privacy by design? And specifically, as you mentioned, I thought it was very interesting, and I believe it's true that LLM models and other such models are not analytical. They're more probabilistic and more mathematical, which is a little bit different, and therefore you're basically egging them on essentially to give information that's either ethically wrong or evil or whatever else is going on. So I'm curious to know if this is a focus now of by design incorporating this kind of guardrails into products.
So I kind of want to follow up on what Mayan said, right, about how the current LLMs are an accumulation of what has, previous generations kind of collective intellectual property. And I'm trying to think how that would play out forward when more and more of the internet is actually fed by the results, right, produced by previous, right, LLMs. And then you have that kind of fed back into the system. And then we have capitalization on what originally was capitalization on the previous generation. So you understand where I'm going with this.
Okay, so the answer would be yes. We have we have a concept called responsible AI. It has to do with all Microsoft products, not just language models, but now it's like a big thing. We have very strict like boundaries we should follow, and we should always measure our outputs and see what is the impact of each and every specific feature we are using. We need to measure it and to explain how it could somehow do something that is not supposed to. And actually, there is a big research in this area, and it was here even before those LLMs. Like, how do you ever measure how good a summarization is? And we are using existing tools and develop new ones in this context. And we actually have like we need to pass several committees to make sure all our products stay in some standard of this.